wanna sleep in, cause I got something to prove. I gotta take what I hate and finally make a move. I think of you and all the shit you don't do.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another one of my videos. For like the past 2 months, I've been getting a lot of phone calls and a lot of consultations, so I just decided to record my phone conversations that I'm having with actual people like you, just to make content. And also, people were asking me the same question over and over again, so I figured I'd just make videos of me answering the questions. That way, hopefully, I answer the questions for you guys and you stop asking me the same questions over and over again. But I realized that style of video, that style of content, might not be the best, especially for some of my newer viewers who don't really know my whole story. So today I'm gonna mix it up. I'm gonna make a slightly different video. I just wanna talk about 5 common issues that I've been having with my trucking company, and a lot of them are going to be geared towards hiring and managing other people, because as you already know, what I do is I just started a trucking company. I'm not a typical owner-operator. I don't actually drive my truck. So a lot of my daily challenges come from managing my driver, managing my dispatcher, and me being stuck in my office in Pennsylvania while my truck is out in Michigan and Florida and Arizona. And it's just really difficult to manage everything whenever I'm sitting in my office, sitting behind the computer, and I'm not really understanding what's going on. Whenever I started making this list, I really tried to not make it all about the driver, because I understand truck drivers, they drive trucks. That's what they do. They think that they're the best at it, and whenever they're in real time, stuck in traffic or dealing with the weather or just dealing with conditions out of their control, drivers try to use their best judgment to go take an alternative route or take a detour. And it's unfair for us as owners or dispatchers or brokers to really judge the truck drivers. I love all of you truck drivers. You guys have an incredibly difficult job, and I respect what you all do. So whenever I made this list, I tried to not just make a long list of complaints about my driver, because I understand your job is difficult, but it's just so frustrating for me and for my dispatcher and for brokers, because we're stuck in the office. Like, we don't know what's really going on. So 99% of the time, I just have to take your word for it. And so much of my business depends on the communication and the on-time delivery of my truck drivers. So with all that being said, I'm gonna kick off this list of 5 challenges that I have while running my trucking business. Number 1 is whenever my driver goes off route, he takes a detour. Very specific example, last week my driver was driving from Michigan to New Jersey, and he had a perfectly planned route going in the north part of Ohio, north part of Pennsylvania. He's gonna land in New Jersey same day, position himself perfectly to deliver in the morning. For whatever reason, he took a detour like 100 miles south and went through Columbus, Ohio, and then it ended up adding 3 hours to his delivery time. So he ran out of hours on that day, so he was late next day for the delivery, and it just messed up the whole load that my dispatcher had planned. Things like this happen all the time, and it's so frustrating whenever my drivers just don't communicate. I completely understand that you might have traffic, you might need to take a detour, but if you're a driver, if you're a company driver, if you're an owner-operator, just the most important thing you can do is communicate with your dispatcher, communicate with the broker, communicate with the business owner or your fleet manager, whoever is managing you and your truck. Just communicate. If you're in a detour, if you're stopped because of traffic, just call your dispatcher, call your broker, let them know, ask them if he wants you to take the detour or if he just wants you to sit in traffic for 30 minutes and wait it out. Just please, whatever you do, just don't drive 100 miles south. And that's the other thing. It's impossible for me to really know if my driver is telling me the truth. I would never accuse someone of lying unless it's been proven that they lied. But for someone to take a detour an hour south just because of traffic seems a little suspicious. Once again, I don't want this video to turn into me just complaining about my driver and my dispatcher. And so what I'm gonna try to do is offer a solution. For every problem, I'm gonna try to offer a solution. So the problem is your driver is going to take a ridiculous detour that's going to add miles and it's going to decrease your profit. So the solution is just really reinforce with your driver communication. Like, anytime he's going to go off course, anytime he's going to take a detour, just call the dispatcher, call me, call the broker, call your manager. Just ask, what do you want me to do in this situation? Don't go rogue, don't be a cowboy, don't try to take the detour because you think you know best. I'm sure you're really great at driving the truck, but just ask your manager before you take a detour. I don't know, that's just my opinion, take it or leave it. The second thing is, if you hire a dispatcher, you're basically putting a lot of faith and a lot of control in the hands of your dispatcher for the success or failure of your business. And from my experience, dispatchers are not going to negotiate as much as you would for your own business. Don't get me wrong, I love my dispatcher. I've been working with him for an entire year. It's just the nature of outsourcing a task like sales, like dispatching. I only have one truck and one driver, so I would negotiate my heart out for this one truck. I would demand that extra $200 because that's the only thing I have. But my dispatcher, he has 10 other trucks. He doesn't, $2,000 versus $2,200, no offense to him, he doesn't really care about that extra $200 for me. So it's really frustrating whenever I see a dispatcher not necessarily negotiating as hard as I would like him to. But to be fair, he has 10 other trucks to worry about, and he's still getting me a load that's paying decent. So the solution would be communicate with your dispatcher. Tell him the bare minimum you're willing to take a load for. If you never tell him that your bare minimum is $2.90 and he books you a load for $2.80, you can't blame him because he didn't know that your bottom expectation was $2.90. If you're hiring a new dispatcher, I always say this, give your new dispatcher 2 weeks to prove himself. If you start working with him on Monday and he gets you a terrible load and you're stuck at the shipper for 5 hours and you have to go to 3 different places to pick up and just everything seems like it's going terribly, don't fire your dispatcher right away. Give him 2 weeks to prove himself. And second of all, if you are working with a new dispatcher, try not to look at every single load individually and get upset about a low rate per mile because he might be taking you from Florida to Michigan and it might be a really low rate per mile. But once you leave Michigan, he might get a really high rate per mile. So if you look at both loads averaged out together, then the rate per mile might be what you want. So don't freak out over every single load. Look at like an entire week and average out the total money you got, the total miles you drove, and look at the total rate per mile for the entire week. My third issue that I've been having is mechanics. Mechanics can be very difficult to work with for 3 reasons. They take forever. They overpromise and they say your truck's gonna be ready tomorrow when in reality it's not gonna be ready until the next day or the next day. And third, I feel like sometimes they overcharge you or they rip you off. First of all, with them taking forever, it seems like every mechanic in the entire country is having a labor shortage, and they might be, but they always tell me, listen, I've only got one guy in the shop today. I'm trying to get to your truck as fast as possible. And then they always overpromise and underdeliver. And they're always telling me your truck's gonna be ready today, your truck's gonna be ready today, and it literally never is ready today. And then third, I don't really know much about engines and mechanics. I don't really know how much they really should be charging me, so I just feel like a mechanic could just very easily rip me off. So a solution for that is manage your own expectations. You can only control so much. So if you're putting your truck in the shop, just whatever your mechanic tells you, maybe communicate with your broker or your driver, give them like a 24-hour buffer. So if your mechanic tells you the truck's gonna be ready on Wednesday, maybe tell your driver, hey, truck's probably not gonna be ready until Thursday. Tell your broker, hey, truck's in the shop, I won't be available until Thursday. That way you're not having like this long chain of frustration between you and your dispatcher and your broker and your driver and your mechanic. Just be that buffer of communication so that you can manage the expectations of your driver and whenever the load is gonna be picked up or delivered on time. And then the other thing with the price of your repairs and maintenance, I feel like the only way to get through this is through experience. So keep all of your receipts. So if you go to your mechanic and get an oil change and he charges you $500 and it takes, however, two hours of labor, and you go to a different mechanic or you go back to the same mechanic and maybe they're saying it took 3 hours, through your experience and through the paperwork that you have, you'll be able to kind of negotiate and kind of like keep it real with the mechanic. Like, hey, listen, I've had this truck for 2 years now. I get an oil change every 2 months and it never takes more than 2 hours. Like, are you sure it really took you 3 hours? That's just a very specific example. But the more times you go to the mechanic, the more receipts you get, the more times you have repairs and maintenance. Like, I had to get my clutch replaced and it cost me $5,000. So God forbid that ever happens again. I'll have a rough idea, okay, if I need to get my clutch replaced, it's probably gonna be around $5,000. So if I got some mechanic telling me it's gonna be $10,000, I'll know he's trying to rip me off and that's ridiculous. But if it were my first time, I would have no idea. So the solution to mechanics potentially ripping you off or lying to you is only going to be solved through experience. Keep all those receipts and just have real conversations with your mechanic, and hopefully they don't rip you off. Fourth frustration is whenever my factoring company won't accept my paperwork. Unbelievably frustrating. And the big issue is because I'm not handling the paperwork directly. It's most of the time my driver, and my driver sometimes takes a bad picture of the bill of lading or doesn't necessarily get the signature in the right spot on the bill of lading. So if you're the driver, if you are controlling your paperwork, you're probably not having this issue. But for me, because I have a driver, because I have a dispatcher, because I have somebody else handling my paperwork and just taking pictures of it and sending it to me, so many times it's just a bad picture. Or I swear I had a driver a couple months ago who didn't even really receive a bill of lading because the shipper told him like, hey, no, don't worry about it. So that was obviously a coaching point. I had to tell my driver, never ever leave a shipper or a receiver without a bill of lading, without paperwork. But it's just the growing pains of working with new drivers, especially in the spot market, working with dozens of different brokers and shippers and receivers. There's just a lot of variables that you have to account for. And so the solution to your factoring company not accepting your paperwork would be to just have a system in place where your driver can very easily either use an iPad or a tablet or his phone to scan a PDF image of the bill of lading and just have your driver send it to you right away. And then also have a system in place where you can get the actual physical paper copy once a week or once every 2 weeks. I've even gone so far as buying like 10 or 20 of those big manila envelopes and then putting stamps on every single envelope. And I just told my driver, hey, every single week, at the end of the week, put all of your paperwork in this envelope and mail it to me. If the truck is in your hometown, that's even better. Just go to the truck every single week and get the actual paper copy of the bill of lading. That saved me multiple times because I've been able to, a perfect example is if there's like 2 or 3 pages of the bill of lading and my driver only sends me the first page, obviously the factoring company and the broker, they are always going to want all 3 pages of the bill of lading. So I've had situations in the past where the factoring company says, hey, this is only page 1, where's page 2 and page 3? And because I had the paper copy, because it was the end of the week and either my driver mailed it to me or I went to the truck and actually picked up the paper copies, because of that, I was then able to, take the staple out, scan all 3 pages, give it to the factoring company, no issues. Finally, on that subject, keep all of your bills of lading. So I had a load 30 days later that was disputed because the image of the bill of lading was unclear. Thank goodness I kept the paper copy. I was able to rescan the document, send it into the factoring company, no issues. But just have a system in place for your driver or your dispatcher to send you the paperwork and then keep the paper copy just in case. Okay, so far in review, the 4 issues I've had is your driver taking a detour or taking an extra route, adding extra miles to your load. Second, your dispatcher might not be negotiating like you want him to get that higher rate per mile. Third is mechanics ripping you off and taking too long. Fourth is your factoring company not accepting your paperwork. The 5th issue that I've been having is my drivers sometimes don't like downloading the app from the broker for tracking. And this came up 2 months ago with my old driver. He hated whenever brokers would call him or communicate with him on his personal cell phone, which I totally understand. Like if you're an owner operator, that's one thing because you're kind of the business owner, so it is what it is. But if you're trying to hire like a traditional company driver, they want nothing to do with that on their personal phone. And he hated downloading the different apps from the brokers. And at one point, it literally cost me $300 because that was part of the negotiation with the rate confirmation. My driver had to sign up for tracking, GPS tracking, in order for me to get that extra $300. So the solution for that would be try to get a tablet where they can download all the apps, communicate with the broker, receive text messages, log into their ELD, try to get like a tablet for the truck. It's also good for GPS, but I've had issues with that because my tablet can't accept text messages. So in order for the broker to send like the macro tracking point to the tablet, they need to be able to send a text message, and I can't do that with my tablet. So my driver now, he just receives all the text messages straight from the broker, and it's really frustrating for him. So maybe a potential solution for that would just be to try to get on like Verizon or AT&T, like try to get a cheap cell phone plan and like maybe even get a company phone for your driver. So on top, the tablet only cost me $40 a month. I can't imagine like a really basic phone would be much more, it'd probably be less than $40 a month. And that might really help you if you're trying to hire a driver, or even if you're an owner operator yourself. It might be nice to have an additional phone. That way you can turn it off on your 10-hour break. You can turn it off on your 34-hour reset on the weekend. That way you're not getting random phone calls from brokers whenever you're off duty. So it might not be a bad idea. Get an extra cell phone. It's probably not too expensive, and it'll probably save you a lot of headaches moving forward.